This is a post stamp. No, it's a cube. I need to move around. No, it's a cat thingamajig. You should go near. No, it's me.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Backlog Activated. Today I'm joined by Weirdo Maxim. May I say that first transition you did actually worked out pretty well. I think that was a nice one.
Thank you.
The rest were a little bit more noticeable, but I liked that first one for sure. Maxim, why were you changing objects today?
Oh, very convenient. Well, it just so happens that we're going to be talking about today's game. I do not know how to pronounce it, but it is Vignettes. This one.
Vignettes is an interesting game for sure. As Weirdo Maxim very diligently described in the intro, visually, he's a master of visual arts, you know. It's a game about objects where when you shift the orientation, it switches to another object, and you use that basically to solve puzzles. And I think that's one of the first things I noticed was how deceptively puzzle solving it was. Like, when I was first messing around with it, it almost felt like a little bit like a simulator or something, or like kind of a cool trick, just seeing where you can... Basically, the progression isn't just orienting the objects. There's actually some puzzles hidden within and some connectivity between the objects, which I was pleasantly surprised about. Maybe the coolest part is just finding an orientation that you didn't know was possible, and then later accidentally like finding another one. I think those happy accidents was what was really fun with this, because there'd be times where I didn't even know I was going to find like a new object.
I mean, yes, the happy accident was pretty nice every now and then, but then there's also times where you get stuck in one thing. It's like, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do? What do I do? And you just move around and you just don't know what to do, and then you just move one. It's like, finally. And there's also times where you do so many times you just go backtrack instead of forward, which is very annoying at times as well. So it takes time to get used to it.
A specific example of the like backtracking on accident is I don't know if you saw the basket where you have to throw the socks in. The amount of times I've like accidentally dumped out my socks and I have to like re-click it like over and over again. Stuff like that kind of got a little bit annoying, and it made me wonder if this game would almost benefit. I understand that the point is starting from the phone and making your way around, but I at some points I felt like I really wanted a level select, even if it just simply brought you to each level, or each area rather. But I think there was just a series of repetition that was starting to get annoying to me with having to start from the phone immediately, which I don't know if you noticed the symbolism, right? But have you heard of the game Telephone?
It's, if I'm correct, it's equivalent of Chinese Whisper, right?
I don't know what that is, but that sounds like what it is, where you basically explain something to someone's ear, they then interpret it to someone else, and eventually the saying gets changed so much because they only hear it once. You start with a telephone in this game, and it slowly shifts into different objects and stuff, and I thought that was a really fun parallel right there, which was kind of cool, because it does feel like a game of telephone. Things are slowly shifting into other things, which is kind of cool. But I don't know. What do you think was the part that stood out the most about the game to you? Like, is there something that really stuck with you for either good or bad reasons?
Good question. It's a lot of things. The music was pretty good. I mean, everything just fit. Everything was fit.
Right.
There was this story with the keys and such, and then there was like things you had to press buttons and everything. But the thing that stuck out, I guess it's the puzzle itself. While it was annoying at times, it was the main thing. It was just, moving this, that's nice. Moving this, it suddenly became that. I really liked how like a simple thing just suddenly became something more complex. Like, I think, if I'm correct, a TV became a toaster or something like that. It's like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, and there's a lot of clever transitions like that. There'd be times where something wouldn't look like it no matter what you do unless you actually interact with it, and then suddenly you can see how it shifts into the thing when you orient it. And yeah, I think you were right on the money when you mentioned how it all kind of works together. Something we've talked about a lot in this series is we find games that have, you know, kind of mixed genres or mixed elements that we were like, well, that it doesn't feel like it fits together. It feels like they maybe should have focused on one, or maybe find a way to tie them in together or something like that. This game is definitely not that case. It's everything in this game works as one unified package, and I have a lot of respect for that. Being able to try different kind of mechanics and approaches and still being able to be like, hey, this all fits together. This is one cohesive game. And you also mentioned the complexity. Like, there's no reason for the game to have as much complexity as it does, yet it does have it, which is really cool because the base is so simple. You're just maneuvering things and doing very simple interactions with each of the objects, yet there is complexity within the puzzles. And I think a big part that helps that is having the objects have interaction with each other, even though you're switching them out, right? And a big thing I always think about is the camera, how you have to like take pictures in specific environments, which then later add to your photo book. But in order to change the environments, you have to do interactions with other objects. So anytime you lock in a new environment, you think, okay, is there a way I can trace this back to the camera? And just that kind of stuff is really fun. Yeah, I was surprised at the level of complexity they were able to sneak into this very simple object moving game. You know, it's essentially just a 3D viewer until you actually look more into it.
There was a lot of these kind of what you call Easter eggs, you could say, that you had to also find. Like one of them you said like the photo clicking, but there was also things like, oh, you need to press the television button so that you can unlock something, or you had to do something with the lamps, and so on and so forth. At times I think that's a really good idea, and I really do appreciate that, but I haven't played too much. I have played like around 2-3 worlds and such, but I have a feeling that I hope it's not too much, because if there's like too much things you need to unlock, too much things you need to find, then too much becomes a bad thing. Despite being all a good thing, too much anything is bad.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I got around 2 or 3 worlds also. And one thing I was noticing, the game takes a very simplistic approach when it comes to giving information. Everything is like icon based. Sometimes I even got confused in the menus. I'm like, is that what that icon means? And then, I click it. But it carries through to the gameplay as well, where I'd see certain icons that were associated with specific puzzles, and then later see like icons that were similar, but it turns out they didn't have any correlation. They were 2 completely separate puzzles. And I think that's an example of what you're talking about, where you could add too much and they start confusing and conflicting with each other a little bit. I think for the most part, the way they try to combat that is having puzzles isolated within their worlds. The problem is it's not always super clear which world you're in, and that's because there's so many pathways that branch into different ones. You might get a change of music or scenery, but sometimes music and scenery will change within one world as well. So I definitely ran into a couple instances where I was like, one example is the flashlight. There's a flashlight that will show you like a pathway walking. Earlier I saw a map that was associated with a compass, but the flashlight and the compass and the map had nothing to do with, those are 2 separate puzzles completely, yet they had similar iconography. So I think there's like a level of confusion that I was running into with just which objects interacted with each other. But for the most part, I think having such unique interactions with the objects was pretty neat. Like, no 2 objects felt the exact same in terms of interactivity. Now, visually, there's a couple instances where I was like, okay, so another cylindrical container, and then I move in and changes again. There's like the cat food, the pot, and the sock basket. All of them you just kind of like twist to make a circle at some point. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if I need all 3 of these objects, but I think for the most part, they did a good job at making each object feel like it's its own thing and have its own uses, which was pretty cool.
There is like those times where you just move around at times and it feels like, wait, how does that make sense? Which it doesn't. Yeah. But there's also times where it's like, okay, if I turn it around at this angle and then just move it, it suddenly becomes that, and it's like, oh my goodness, my mind is blown.
Yeah, it's so satisfying sometimes. Like the one I think about a lot is like the map that turns into a compass, which then turns into a pocket knife, and it then turns into something else. I don't remember what, but I was just like, this is pretty cool because those were like so fluid in the transitions. Every once in a while they would bend the rules a bit, make some objects appear, disappear, but for the most part, there'd be times where I'd return to an old object somehow through a branching path. I'd be like, oh shoot, I'm back at the toaster. And it's like, I didn't even know that was one of the possibilities. And I think that part's pretty cool. The fact that there's so many opportunities to branch into another world and then back into the old world and stuff like that. And it's a little bit of a memory game too, because you got to keep track of which route you want to take in order to unlock more things. And it does have a decent amount of unlock. I like their collection system in the sense that it's very simple. You can see exactly what you're missing. A lot of times you can even guess what the object is that you're missing. You just got to find it. And that was kind of cool, I think. But again, it does go back a little bit to the repetition of starting from square one. And sometimes, I was kind of tired of just seeing that phone and switching in and doing things I'd done over. The sock basket, I think, is a horrible object. They probably should have removed that completely, just because you got to constantly throw the socks in, or just make it throw like 2 or 3 or something, man. I had to go through that basket so many times.
So, do you recommend a game that's very hard to pronounce, apparently? Vegetable. Do you recommend Vegetables?
I think Vegetables is really fun, and I think it's fun from the get-go when you first twist the title and it turns into something else. I think, honestly, one thing it's worth mentioning, the colors were starting to irritate me after a while. I get like the theme of it, and it's a cool aesthetic, obviously, but not having shading in the objects and having such big contrasts with the objects in the background, it eventually started messing with my eyes a little bit, I feel like. But also because they took that approach, there's some areas that were really able to utilize the contrasting colors to make cool backgrounds. The hourglass that has kind of a kaleidoscope background as you turn it, and then changes the background as the balls fall down the hourglass. Stuff like that was really cool, and I think a lot of it could only be done with this visual style. But also, after a while of looking at it, I felt like I needed to take a break, like just from how much yellow was being blasted into my eyes. That's neither here nor there. In terms of recommendations, though, I would absolutely recommend this game. I think it's I wouldn't recommend like going out of your way to 100% it, but keep playing as much fun until you stop having fun, basically. And it's a game that you're not going to experience just by playing any other, which I think is always a benefit. And I don't know, there wasn't, other than throwing socks into a basket, there wasn't really any time where I wasn't enjoying myself. So I think that's definitely worth a lot in my book. So definitely give Vignettes a try if you have the chance.
As for me, I'm kind of half and half at it. Vignette is a very fun game, and it's like, yeah, it's a very quick game. You play it like for an hour or two and then move on and such. But then you have to also consider that there's other games that's done something similar. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nope has done somewhat similar to it. Not the whole perspective, but pressing buttons, finding new things, etc., etc. At one point, I do want to recommend this game because this is a very cool concept. But like you said, the colors, and sometimes it gets annoying over times, and then there's maybe too many things at once. Of course, we only have played 2-3 worlds, so for all we know, the later states could be much more amazing. But at the same time, I will recommend this game, but do be cautious. You might only play once or twice.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it. I don't see myself coming back to it anytime soon. It seems like it'd be a fun game to like stream, have chat help you try to figure out the puzzles and stuff like that. And it's cool to get that satisfaction of like, oh, this changed into that. But you're mentioning like future worlds and stuff. I only imagine that the future worlds are going to get in a way more tedious because you're always starting from square one. So the more you progress, the more you have to redo when you want to try things, unless you just go a no redoing route. But sometimes it feels necessary. But yeah, I think it's definitely a fun puzzle solving game and memory game, and you get to just see cool ways objects turn into other things, which is always really fun. So if you don't play it, at least watch videos on it because it's definitely interesting to watch, I'd say. And with that, I think that's going to do it for our discussion on Vignettes. And if you guys would like to see more discussions on more games, including a new game coming out next week, then you can subscribe to Backlog Activated to check that out. And of course, you can check out our personal channels linked in the description. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Subscribe, otherwise I'm gonna change your face into a block. Bye.